Downtown Orangeburg Revitalization Association, Downtown Orangeburg. We have a very talented team here who can tell you more about the process as they show you and me together for the first time their recommendations for Downtown Orangeburg. But before they do so, there's several people in the room, of course, that I need to take a moment to thank. First, the sponsors in the process have been the City of Orangeburg, and representing the City of Orangeburg today, we have Mayor Butler, Councilman Liz Zimmerman-Kitt, Mr. Bernard Hare, Mr. Charlie Jernigan, Mr. Richard Stroman, and City Administrator Mr. John Yao and Mr. John Singh. If y'all would mind raising your hands so we can thank you for your support of the process. Elected officials to please stand.
Thank you.
Thank you for your support. The intrepid DORA Board of Directors, DORA board members have been so supportive of this concept and process since it was first introduced in our strategic plan in May of 2013. DORA board members, I won't take time to introduce all of you, but you know how grateful we are for your service and all you do for downtown. If you kindly stand so we can recognize you. The other key partner in this process has been the Orangeburg County Chamber of Commerce and their outstanding president, leader, and my friend Dee Cook. So Dee, if you and your board would kindly stand so we can thank you. DORA has been so successful for more than 20 years thanks to the many people who volunteer to make all of its activities possible. And if you have been a DORA volunteer or currently a DORA volunteer, please raise your hand. Thank you. We'd like to thank Fats Cafe for those delicious calabash chicken tenders, and they're going to eat them when you're not pregnant, so be sure you get enough. Rosalia's Mexican restaurant, of course, located in downtown Orangeburg at 1058 Russell Street. And the new JoJo's Filipino Cuisine, the new downtown restaurant on the 1100 block, all have generously donated food, as well as Orangeburg Coca-Cola. We'd also like to mention that we're joined by, I see Mr. Marion Lloyd in the back from Orangeburg County. We appreciate Orangeburg County's support as well. And Regional Director from U.S. Senator Tim Scott's office is here with us this afternoon, Mr. A.D. Jordan. Appreciate your interest and your support. So thank you for indulging me with those wonderful thank yous for the number of people who've made the process possible. We always invite you to downtown Orangeburg, and without further ado, I'll introduce Randy Wilson, who's led our team from Community Design Solutions based in Columbia.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good afternoon, and on behalf of my entire team, I'd also like to extend a very special thanks not only to all the funding partners and participants that Jennifer just introduced, but this is perhaps the most important group that I'd like to thank, and that's yourself, if this will start working. There we go, right there. If you were there the other night, Monday night, at the Bluebird Theater, raise your hand, please. Thank you. Wow, tremendous. As Ben alluded to at the conclusion of that presentation, that input session, after hundreds and hundreds of planning workshops just like this all across America, Orangeburg, South Carolina represented the single largest attendance as a percentage of population and in accordance to the diversity of the community of any community we've ever worked in. That, my friends, is clap worthy. Give yourself a hand. And we really appreciate the fact that you spoke your mind and you told us the things that were on your heart, both the things you loved about Orangeburg as well as the things that you'd like to see changed. I need it. Thank you, Ben. But you spoke your mind and you gave us insight into things that you hope and you dream aspire to here in this community. And I hope today what you're going to see is our work that reflects back to you that we heard you, that your ideas were sound, that they were good, and hopefully you're going to see them interpreted in a way that hopefully will be terribly inspiring. Here's some of the things that you taught us. Remember we asked that question about the postcard. What do you love about Orangeburg? How would you brag about it? And you talked about things like Edistoke Gardens, the Chamber Building, Veterans Memorial, Stevenson Auditorium, all of these really wonderful projects and investments that have been made in the downtown area. You also noted, and we also saw, that you aren't stopping there. You already have in the works planned continuation of some of those efforts in the streetscaping along additional parts of Russell and Delta. You've got 3 institutions of higher education here between South Carolina State, Platinum University, and OC Tech, all of which are incredible economic development engines in your community. But what's more is we heard that many of those desire a downtown presence, which really bodes well for your future. And of course, you have successful events that bring people downtown, whether it's through the Taste or the Rose Festival. Moreover, you've got these quality performance venues between the Bluebird and Stevenson Auditorium. Of course, we're actually sitting in another one right now, which is not so much a performance, but a terrific venue that showcases the arts. You've got the wealth of historic buildings and properties that are kind of the repository of the history and the record of the birth and the establishment and the development of this place. And these things are irreplaceable. They are precisely what distinguishes you from other places. Even some of your humble buildings tell a very important story, and they need to be maintained and protected. And of course, you've got significant parking resources that have been developed throughout the downtown, whether in dedicated lots or on-street parking. And here's the transition. However, or but, there are some challenges that remain that we're going to try to address today. Of course, we heard that your downtown retail market is underperforming. We've heard in many cases there's a perception about downtown. In some cases it's negative. How can we stem that tide? How can we tell the stories to convert users? But we also observed some other things, and you told us some things. The fact that Russell Street, in your case, your Main Street, it's a very long corridor, and what happens oftentimes if we aren't careful is we can spread our efforts too thin. One of the strategies you'll see today is we're going to concentrate our efforts in specific strategic points along the Russell Street corridor. You've got this fantastic public environment, specifically your parks, your streetscapes. However, some of the buildings in their design or their disrepair are lagging. How can we address that? And while you have these wonderful parking assets, occasionally the curse and the blessing is they're only located by major destinations. And so sometimes that prevents you sometimes from browsing and walking throughout the rest of the downtown. So in response to what you told us and what we observed in some of these challenges, we've come up with a 5-fold strategy, 5 key goals, if you will, tactics and strategies to try to address that previous slide and its shortcomings. Specifically today, we're going to address how can we get more people downtown? How can we change perception and build community pride? We're actually going to suspend that and move it to the end of the presentation. Third, how can we address the vacant and deteriorating buildings? Fourth, how can we leverage your assets and build momentum and concentrate our efforts both in the short term and in the long term? And then finally, how can we build and maintain consumer confidence? So to kick us off today related to strategies to employ to get people more downtown in response to the market, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Coker.
Thank you, Randy. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. How's the chicken? We're all excited about it later on.
Oh, it's gone.
Really? All right, here we go. First, I have a question for you. Raise your hand, or please let me know if you participated in the Future of Retail in Orangeburg online survey. Great. Thank you all very much. So that's about half the room. I made this slide last night, so it's actually not quite up to date. We've had almost 600 responses to that survey. And for those of you who did not take it, it asked a series of questions really about how you perceive the overall quality of the retail market in Orangeburg, and then specifically questions about downtown, about perceptions of quality, of products, of service, safety, and so forth. And before I get into some of those responses, I just want to highlight really some of the demographics of the folks who participated in the survey. First of all, we had 8% of respondents identify themselves as either Claflin, SC State, or OC Tech students. Ladies, congratulations. 75% of the respondents were women. But let's face it, 75% of the dollars spent, at least in my household, comes from a female. And the other piece that's important is household income. Do note this top one, under $25,000 a year, is a small sliver. So we were unable to get good participation from low-income community. So do keep that in mind, or this in mind, as we go forward. I will say that from the standpoint of downtown retail, we are talking about folks with some level of disposable income. When we start talking about building up retail recruitment and so forth. So to some degree, you know, we do really want to focus on these folks here who do have some money to spend, while remembering that there are folks with immediate needs who need to be served as well, who were not represented in the survey. So I'll jump on into some of the responses. The first slide says, please check the statement that best describes how frequently you shop in the following locations. If it's blue, that's once or more per week. The red is once or twice a month. Green is a few times per year, and purple is rarely to never. And so for each of these rows here, this is a bar that goes from 0 to 100%. So you can gauge how frequently folks shop. Orangeburg in general was well over 60%. Orangeburg County, well over half of the respondents. Online took third place. And then you see things starting to move out of Orangeburg County into the Columbia area, other nearby communities. That was a general question, so it could still be in the county. Catalog mail order, and downtown. Downtown came in at 2.4% of responses. That's very low and disconcerting, especially when you see this rarely to never category. Well over 50% of those who responded to the survey indicated that they rarely or never shop downtown. So that's a big problem. That's a very big problem. But it's one that we can address. It's one that we're going to confront today and hopefully help you craft strategies to overcome that and turn the tide. When we asked specifically why people don't shop more often in Orangeburg, the #1 response was lack of stores, products, and variety, followed by the quality of the stores and products. I think this idea of poor service and safety concerns, our experience in downtown at least, is that that is more likely a perception problem than a reality problem. And then some good news, inconvenient business hours, prices, and overall inconvenience to parking and locational inconvenience, none of those are issues. So basically people are saying downtown is close by, it's convenient, I can park, stores are open when I need them to be open. They just don't necessarily have what I want, the selection that I want, and potentially the service that I want. So when we started asking follow-up questions, such as, you know, how far are you willing to go to shop on a regular basis, over 50% of respondents said as far away as Columbia or Charleston. And then when we asked us another question with regards to what kinds of businesses people would like to see in downtown, the #1 with a bullet, almost half of all respondents indicated restaurants, followed by clothing, stores, coffee shop, and boutiques. So this, what you just saw, this is what you told us starting before this week, and in a lot of ways it echoes the sentiments that we've heard over the last 3 days. We're going to build on that input and supplement it with some work that we had with cooperating local merchants, downtown merchants. During the week of April 15th, we had 10 merchants participate in a zip code survey of customers. Merchants, if you participating merchants, they're probably all at work right now. That's why we got one in the back. 2. All right, great. Well, we thank you for that. During that 1-week period, we were able to record almost 600 customer visits, and those customers came from 51 unique zip codes across the country, plus one Canadian. It just said Canada. We're not sure where in Canada, but somewhere. And so what we did is we took all of those numbers, all of those data, and we aggregated it. We compiled it, and what we saw was once you break it out by county, about 80% of those visits were from residents of Orangeburg County. So it's an intensely local market. You can see Calhoun at 8%, Bamberg at 5%, Dorchester, Lexington, Clarendon at 1%. So basically, once you take Orangeburg and adjoining or adjacent counties, that accounts for well over 90% of all the visits that were recorded during that 1 week period. The next thing that we do, once we have an idea of where people are coming from, not all geographies, not all zip codes have the same number of people, so we have to weight those zip codes based on the population size. And to do that, what we do is we take the population of geography of a zip code, in this case, we divide it by the number of visits, and with a little bit of mumbo jumbo, we can tell you how many visits from each individual zip code per 1,000 registered. So the higher this number, this index represents a strong market, a loyal consumer market. And so we were able to literally stitch together a portrait of that 1 week period in which the most loyal customers for downtown live in a 5 zip code area, the 2 Orangeburg zip codes, Cordova, Bowman, and Cameron. So, once we understand where people are coming from, we can understand who they are. And so, when we start to look at what we're now calling the PTA, or primary trade area, we can analyze the population size, which in this case is nearly 55,000 people. We can also look at other socioeconomic data, such as median household income, and you can see where the primary trade area really is above that of the city, but is very much in line with the county as a whole. That's not surprising because the geography includes the city as well as large portions of Orangeburg County. When we look at projected population growth, what we see is a market that, all things remaining the same, no big announcements down the turnpike. Population is stable. That's a slight decline that's expected, but overall it's stable. So that's not a bad thing. Other markers of the primary trade area of residents who live in it, what you see here is what we're calling life stage segmentation. Fancy term, but basically what it means is if you're in the blue pie, you're in family years. If you're in the red, you're young and single, and if you're green, that means you're 55 or older. The darker the shade of blue, red, or green, the higher the household income. And the lighter, the lower the household income. And so what you see is that, we have in Orangeburg a large slice of low-income young folks. Let's be honest, a lot of them are college students. I was a poor college student for 3 degrees, like a decade. So I totally get it. I totally understand. But one thing to notice is that in Orangeburg, in the primary trade area, we actually have some significant chunks of middle income, both families and seniors. And so those are folks with some disposable income at hand. And so as we start to think about retail growth, those are some of the folks that we want to focus on. Again, the primary trade area that we've identified is about 55,000 people. When you look at how much money, retail dollars, these people spend on an annual basis, that represents about a $715 million market. So that's every pair of shoes, every restaurant tab, every gasoline station purchase, every shirt, all of that rolled into one by 55,000 people is equal to about $715 million a year. Stores in the exact same area, the same geography, sell on average closer to $1 billion a year in retail merchandise. So what that means is that there's an overall inflow of dollars from outside Orangeburg's trade area into the trade area. Now let's break it down and talk about why. I'm not going to bore you with this slide or this slide, because really what I want to do is tell you where you're doing well and tell you where you're not doing well. Where you're not doing well is actually an opportunity. So key inflow categories. This is where outside money is coming in. Home centers, you've got your Lowe's, pharmacies and drugstores. You have a lot of chain pharmacies in town, beer, wine, and liquor stores, gasoline stations, other general merchandise. That's your Family Dollar, Dollar General. Limited service eating places, that's fast food, and special food services, that would actually be country club. So what you see here is a local economy that's doing really well with some basic services, both for families and seniors and then college students. Like I said, I know I was in college for 10 years. And then also it's doing extremely well out on the interstate. So that's where you have your fast food. From what I understand, your Chick-fil-A is one of the highest performing in the Southeast. And then your Dollar Generals that are sprinkled throughout the city and the county. Gas stations, of course, along your major thoroughfares. And special food services, country club. So that's where you're pulling in dollars, a lot of dollars. Here's where you're taking your dollars elsewhere. Supermarkets and grocery stores. This is a key category because of the recent closure of Bilo. Piggly Wiggly, I'm so sorry. And Reed's, that's right. Bilo, sorry, I got that backwards. At any rate, 2 grocery stores recently closed. My data are from last year, so they don't even show that. But what the numbers that I have access to show demand for 2 grocery stores. So that number is going to be even higher. Specialty food stores. This is an interesting category. You know, when we think about specialty food, we think about a high-end grocery store, fresh market. That's not really what this category is. It can have higher-end goods, but it can also have locally grown, locally produced produce and goods. When you look at this category, it's about a $7 million market for Orangeburg in annual expenditures. When you look at the annual sales, it's less than $1 million. So literally, 90% of all the dollars that you're spending in this retail category, you're taking your money up to Columbia, you're taking it down to Charleston, you're not spending it here. A few other categories: women's clothing stores, shoe stores, jewelry stores, sporting goods, hobby toy and games, which is actually can be closely related with sporting goods, and then full service restaurants. I saved this for last because it's the big one. You're doing extremely well in fast food, but about $12 million a year is going out of Orangeburg, and you're taking that money up to Irma and Somerville and Columbia and Charleston and beyond. And so we really see this as a key opportunity for downtown in particular for new businesses. When you look at the big picture, when you step back and look at the amount of dollars that are leaking out of downtown, and you put a dollar figure by it, based on the number of sales per square foot in a given industry, in a given product line, you can estimate the square footage. And a conservative estimate is a capture scenario of 1 in every $5. So let me explain it. So for all the dollars that y'all are taking and spending elsewhere, if just 1 in every $5, if 20% of that money can stay here, and those dollars can be spent in downtown or downtown-oriented businesses, that's equal to about 100,000 square feet. So that's a lot of restaurants, that's a lot of retail, that's a lot of opportunity. That's a big number, and that's one of the things that we're going to get into a little bit later on. Just to show you, to break it down even further into several categories, if you combine hobby toy and games with sporting goods, that's a combined almost $9 million of sales leakage every year. A 20% capture is $1.7 million per year. So what does that mean for downtown? What does that mean for Orangeburg? Let's give ourselves an objective. That means that we want to have a business that's dedicated to that. When we talk about, again, specialty food stores, almost $7 million of leakage. A capture is only $1.3 million. Let's have a downtown specialty grocery. And then restaurants. $12.4 million a year leaking out of the local economy. 20% capture is a little over $2.5 million a year. So what does that mean? Let's try to get 3 to 4 downtown restaurants. So again, these are all things that are doable. They're things that you deserve, and they're things that you can pursue and get. Other key categories, and these are really more for expansion of existing businesses that you have: shoes, jewelry, women's and men's clothing. And so Ben in particular is going to talk about ways to actually take this data and make it mean something and help the community align funding sources and funding streams, generate interest, and be able to capitalize on these dollars that are just floating away right now. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Randy.
Thanks so much, T. As I alluded to, we're actually going to address this category, this recommendation later in the presentation on how some strategic ways in which we can change perception and build community pride. The thing I would like to address for the next few minutes is this notion of how are we going to address the vacant and dilapidated buildings in the downtown. You know, before we can sort of get to brand new ideas and things of that nature, we've got to address what is actually in place. Now, we're a big fan that if we're going to regulate something, we also want to offer incentives. So we're going to talk about this in 3 quick ways. The first is some strategies. Before the incentives can sort of kick in and stimulate investment, how can we protect and show off our buildings in the best way possible? Similarly, before our regulations kick in to safeguard the investment people have made, what are some things that we can do? So here are some of the sort of short-term visual enhancement. In other words, these are temporary solutions. Please don't misunderstand. We are not proposing this for the long term. This is just to put the best face on downtown we possibly can until investment occurs in the downtown. So if there's a vacant building, especially with the plethora of the arts that you have here, the 3 universities, the local high schools, the elementary schools, see if you can employ student work being displayed in some of those vacant windows. So the building is, especially as a pedestrian, you're looking at art as opposed to focusing on a vacant building. Another strategy that was employed up in Illinois is they simply took historic streetscape photographs, plotted them out on white butcher paper, taped them up on the inside of the building. And again, now you don't even focus on the fact that the building is vacant because you're drawn to the nostalgia represented in the photograph. If you can't gain access to the inside of the building, you can take the same strategy employed by cars. Anybody have a vinyl cling wrap on their car? You may have seen it, you know, how people wrap. So this is the same strategy. You simply print out on those vinyl cling wraps historic postcards, street scenes, advertising, retail information, but anything just to put these on the outside of the window. Again, ironically, this building is actually fully occupied, but the occupant is sort of a high-level pharmacy, and they can't allow views into the building. And so this strategy is really helpful there. One of the best strategies we've seen, actually Becky helped with this in one of our fellow Main Street communities in Conway, South Carolina, is to actually do a community pride campaign that Ben's going to talk about a little bit later. These are simply 11 by 17 posters, small enough that you can print off your own home color LaserJet printer. Then they feature photographs of people in the downtown, people that you shop with, people you go to church with, people your kids go to school with. And it simply has simple statements about why do you call Conway or Orangeburg home, why do you love this place. You never even notice the fact that this building is vacant because you're so drawn to the stories of your friends and your neighbors. Those are some temporary strategies we can employ until some of these other things gain traction. We're going to start with some sticks, then we're going to move some carrots. In other words, these are some regulations that we would encourage to be put in place so that long-term people's investment previously and currently in their buildings are safeguarded. I hate to be boring, but here's what we have to do. We've got to set the stage for future work on our buildings. So here's some things we can do. An early warning database, the Smith Bill, property maintenance ordinance, vacant building registry, and receivership. These build upon each other. The good news is 2 of these 5 you already have in place. You already have some form of an early warning database. It's just simply an instrument that records the status, the present status of your buildings. But some things that we would encourage to be added to your current database are triggers, if you will. When these sorts of activities take place, tax delinquency, nuisance abatement, utility shutoffs, they often tend to signal the beginning of significant degradation to the building. And if we can catch it here, and this information is shared across various departments, then hopefully we can rectify the building before it gets to the place where a roof collapses or demolition needs to take place. A next strategy would be the Smith Bill. Okay, there are 2 forms of tax credits. The state of South Carolina has really done us a huge favor. I'm going to say this as simply as I can. The Smith Bill simply introduces tax credits for investment into a building without the burden of adhering to the Secretary of Interior standards for historic renovations. Now, hear this clearly. Our strong preference is that you do traditional historic preservation tax credits because the state of South Carolina is especially generous. They offer either a 20 or 20% historic tax credit that's matched by a 25% state tax credit. So you can conceivably garner 45% income tax credits if you do a historically appropriate renovation to your building. This simply lowers the bar and allows you to do improvements to the building without adhering to those higher standards. We want you to shoot for the higher standards, but if you can't, this can be an important instrument. Your city also already has in place, I'm so proud of them, for having a property maintenance ordinance. Sometimes this is referred to as a minimum maintenance ordinance. Now, I want to empathize with them because sometimes everybody says, well, we have one, but no one enforces it. Well, there's oftentimes very good reasons why those ordinances are not enforced. And probably the chief one is simply the fact that the city just doesn't have a ton of money just sitting aside somewhere waiting to be spent on fixing up people's buildings. That's not what the city's in the business to do, so it makes a lot of sense. But there's some other reasons. You know, enforcing these ordinances sounds easy coming from our lips, but these are your friends and your neighbors that you go to church with, you go to school with, and so to enforce it could create some really awkward situations. But the biggest reason, of course, is because we simply lack the funds to demolish the building, to dispose of the building, to fix up the building, to repair the roof, to board up the windows. And that's what leads to this next most important strategy because it can actually create the income stream to enforce the minimum maintenance ordinance. It's referred to as a vacant building registry. Simply stipulate after which the building needs to go onto the registry. We want to give the property owner the benefit of the doubt. We want them to try to get an occupant for that building, but after a certain period of time, if they can't, and the building just sits vacant, the building goes onto this registry. And there are only 2 really important facets about this registry. Number 1, there's an annual fee that's collected, and number 2, it grants access to the building and contact information for the owner and the insurer. Because once these buildings, and you know this firsthand, once buildings sit vacant for a large period of time, they tend to be magnets for negative activity in and around them. So this allows people to get inside. But here's the key. For every year that the building sits vacant, then the fee goes up slightly. But it is not meant to be a fee that is punitive in nature. The purpose of this fee is precisely to fund the kinds of initiatives that we need to do for enforcement, such as demolition, removal, boarding up of windows, boarding up of doors, etc., etc. Last but not least, the most drastic, if needed, is the concept of receivership. I'm going to keep this as possible. If the city has exhausted every other option to try to motivate a property owner to enhance and protect their building for the set purpose of life and safety, they can appeal to a court and ask for the building to be placed in receivership. A receiver can be virtually any person or group of people that has the wherewithal to fix up a building. And here's the beauty of this concept. That receiver qualifies for a body of funding that you and I just can't appeal to. But the best strategy of all is the fact that the property owner at any point in time in the process can reclaim their building by simply reimbursing any investment that's been made in the building to that point. If the receiver starts to fix up the building and gets 10% finished, and the owner says, wait a second, now I see the potential of my building, it's beautiful. I want it back. All they have to do is pay back the money that's been spent in that day. The project can get completely finished, and the same can transpire. After that point, there's a whole other complicated thing about how the ownership transfers, but this can be a very effective strategy when all other options have been exhausted. Now, my preference would be to turn right now and tell you all the fun incentives, because we don't want to just have regulations in place, we also want to incentive. But we're going to suspend that until the very end of the presentation. So please stay with us. We're going to show you some carrots that will come alongside the sticks that we just talked about. Specifically, we're going to talk about three: a property owner-driven initiative, a retail-driven initiative, and an investor-driven initiative that's in the form of certain grants, incubation programs, and loan guarantee pools. Now, Tom McGilloway is going to come and talk about ways in the physical realm of planning and design we can leverage your assets and concentrate your efforts.
Randy, good morning. Randy had shared with us earlier a lot of the assets, the great things that are already happening in the community, and then some of the challenges we're faced with. T shared with us some economic opportunities, that there are retail opportunities out there that we can draw downtown. So Andy and I had worked on develop some strategies for how do we locate and accommodate some of these. Where do we focus our efforts? As you recall from our earlier discussion, downtown is extremely large. Russell Street is very long. And we have the risk of, while there's been a lot of great investment, we have Edisto Gardens, we have the public safety building, the universities, a lot of other businesses and attractions in the downtown, but they're very spread far apart. And so you don't really see them all at one time or experience them. They're not close enough to each other to walk easily. So the efforts are spread thin. And so we want to talk about some key areas where you can concentrate your efforts. A lot of this is focused on some property opportunities that may be available now and some efforts that you've already started to explore. Over the past many years, there has been several studies on Railroad Corner. We think this is a really incredible opportunity near Claflin and South Carolina State Universities to really start to engage the universities and extend the university presence into the downtown. If we look at Railroad Corner, the concepts that have been developed for redevelopment in the past, we think they continue to be valid, and they really need to be a partnership among the universities in the city. A lot of what we're talking about today is partnerships. There's some early on strategies that are very important. One, simply enhancing the crosswalks, pedestrian signal timing. Students are crossing there to go to the McDonald's, the Verizon store, but that is a challenging intersection. And before investing in an overpass, there is improving the grade level enhancements are very important. Maintaining the existing properties at the corner, just getting, maybe utilizing them with temporary treatments. I'll talk about that a little more. Rehabilitating the existing buildings. We think there's an opportunity for a lot of those buildings that are in place for rehabilitation rather than demolition and replacement. But then also incorporating in with that new infill development, and then allowing for that long-term flexibility to do the overhead pedestrian overpass. The intersection right now, 601 and Russell, very long, the railroad tracks, the street, not a very well-defined crosswalk, and not on all four corners. There's just examples all over the country of very broad roads. The top right is Old Dominion University, 6-lane roadway that students regularly cross, but there's adequate signal timing for the pedestrian crossings. Well-marked crosswalks, but not as well-marked as the bottom right. Simple white striping, they don't have to be brick, but they should be bold and visually, a strong visual reminder to vehicles. And even on the left, there's some decorative imprinting that can be done if you wanted to enhance the look of the crosswalks. The corner, there's already a food truck that operates temporarily on the corner. Getting activity into some of these spaces is important, and some communities actually take advantage of lunchtime crowd tables and chairs, making that available, getting some activity, giving reasons for people to go over there. So these are some very short-term strategies to employ. The existing buildings that are in place, they're humble buildings, but they actually have quite a bit of character to it, and a lot of communities, especially university communities around the country, are renovating buildings for redevelopment. This is Greenville, right up the road on the west end, the before photo on the top. A lot of people didn't have faith in these buildings, but the renovation on the bottom, there's a lot of potential in those buildings for renovation. So we sometimes can't envision what the potential is for the buildings that exist. This is in Baltimore, outside of a university community. Again, very simple one-story buildings that have been renovated with some restaurant, dry cleaning, businesses that serve that local retail community. No architectural wonders, but simple awning treatments, streetscape, make them appealing places to be. And that's offers some potential on Railroad Square. So I'll orient you. So this is Boulevard Street. This is Russell Street. These are the existing buildings that exist along there, and here along Russell Street. What we're suggesting for consideration is that there could, on the corner, potential infill commercial development, maybe some additional infill commercial development coming down the backside, rear parking, and then if the property owners aggregate around here and want to participate, that this could be infill new housing or student housing development that works with this in a unified development. This is slightly different from the concepts that have been looked at in the past that had all new development. We think there's a real opportunity to work with some of the existing development and combine new development and still work with a long-term potential to create an overpass connection over to the universities across 601. Just some examples. These are actually new infill, small infill development. This is new development, but you can see it's very much in scale and character of some of the existing buildings that exist. This could be kind of the character of some of that new infill development that occurs there. And then some of the infill housing, the new housing that we're showing behind that could take on a multiple characters, but the idea would be it would be up against the street and define a street edge along there. The next corridor, and actually I should backtrack and say one of our strategies for dealing with the size of downtown is dividing it into, and you've already started to do this with some of your wayfinding, into more manageable districts, and rather than one long Russell Street, that there's different districts that have different character. The College corridor between 601 and the downtown core, this is Railroad Square corner where we just were. This is the Piggly Wiggly site, the bowling alley site, the former Winn-Dixie, where Woody's will be moving to, and then the square here. So really looking at this corridor that links the universities with the downtown core, and press branding that the College corridor. And here there's really some significant opportunities, long-term opportunities for some of the larger vacant sites for preserving flexibility for long-term incremental development. I want to stress the word incremental because these are large properties and several of them, and there's not magically, you're not going to be able to redevelop the whole area at one time. It is, there is a market for some new development downtown, but we have a lot of vacant space. And so this is looking at protecting these resources for the future when the opportunities arise, as well as providing some short-term solutions. Now, I'm not proposing this scale. The next couple examples we're showing are really what university communities across the country are doing. All of them are looking at reaching out and extending into their downtowns with student housing and mixed-use development, retail on the lower floors, the buildings oriented to the street, and parking located behind. Ignore the heights of these buildings right now. This is in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, at Franklin Marshall University. Student housing above, retail below, oriented to the street. This is in Salisbury University, Maryland. Again, student housing, some retail uses along busy Highway 13, a 6-lane boulevard and the campus behind. And then several other examples, Old Dominion University, University of Maryland, State College, Pennsylvania, some very small scale buildings. But it's a trend that happens all over the country. And whether those exact architectural examples are appropriate is what the key to remember is getting, for any of those buildings that are up against a street or your commercial street, Russell Street, getting active retail uses on the ground floor and helping to activate that Russell Street corridor. When we look at the Piggly Wiggly site, we looked at a couple potential alternatives. One alternative is the reuse, marketing the existing building, reuse for another food service establishment, or it could be divided up into smaller retailers. We think there's a real opportunity, though, with the landscape standards you have in your ordinance and also that you've demonstrated throughout the downtown to enhance that parking lot to make the property more marketable for some infill for new retail development. But a longer-term solution might be preserving the opportunity for some of that infill development that I was just showing you. For example, here that has an edge along Russell Street, and maybe some infill development along here that starts to relate to the existing building. And then this could have some retail uses below. But it's a very deep site, so it would be important to pull the development up to Russell Street if it were ever developed. There's also the option for utilizing some of the existing buildings for locating some of these retail businesses and restaurants that T talked about into those buildings. Again, these are long-term strategies. These aren't going to happen overnight, but the key is to preserve the flexibility to develop them. And when you look at the proximity of the Piggly Wiggly site right here with Railroad Square, there's a real tremendous opportunity to build on those. Again, we don't really see a demand for creating a big mega development over this amount of acreage. The key is to allow some flexibility that some of this can be developed incrementally. There might be a market for the redevelopment of this site before this site, or it might be vice versa. You want to keep that flexibility and not have one be dependent on the other, but you want to think about how they can relate. Maybe they potentially connect over from a pedestrian standpoint mid-block and connect over to if you have the overpass there, or they connect along Russell Street. Similarly, the bowling alley site, there could be some enhancements, reuse of the existing buildings, enhancing the enhancing the parking lot to accommodate and make the sites more marketable. But then again, long-term opportunities for infill development, replacing some or all of the existing buildings with new infill development. It might be, I'm sorry, I'm backing up. It might be organized around some open space that relates to Russell Street. Again, some retail uses here. This might be all residential infill development. The key is keeping most of the parking to the rear and the buildings up relating to the street to reinforce your downtown environment. The Winn-Dixie site, we understand Woody's is locating up to this site, just showing some enhancements to the parking lot with landscape enhancements to make that a more hospitable environment, and also creating a pedestrian connection from Russell Street back to the building.
This is that property and its existing conditions. And first of all, just a sincere thanks to Chan and Jenny for meeting with us and giving us the freedom to take a look at the enhancement of this building. And if you've ever been into Woody's, you realize it is like a pawn shop on steroids. That place is awesome on the inside. It has so much stuff, whether it's outdoor gear, fine jewelry, and the whole 9 yards. And so we appealed to them and said, guys, don't sell yourself too short. Let's think about this new development that would showcase all of the things that you offer. And so in the first stage, just showing the architecture, we're thinking about some really simple gestures to kind of get sort of that outdoor look. Right now, just painting the roof. Don't replace the roof. You can paint this thing for another couple of cycles before you'd even come close to the cost of the metal roof. Then simply, skinning the base of the brick with some stacked stone. It can even be synthetic stacked stone, and then using heavy timbers to get sort of that rustic appearance. And then once you add signage on top of that, then you can feature, all of the things that Woody's actually has to offer, whether it's hunting, fishing, pond, firearms, jewelry, and electronics, just really touting all of the things that they support. If we just froze the rendering here, we're going to go one more stage. You know, the current city offered facade grants is a very substantial sum of money. It's a very generous program. Rough guesstimate is the cost of that facade grant would probably offset between 25% and 30% of the cost of the exterior renovations. I mean, that's how good of an incentive that particular facade grant is. Long term, taking advantage of the site plan that Andy and Tom just drew up, and all of a sudden you see we've taken what was, you know, just kind of a ubiquitous sort of building and really developed a really great asset to anchor the college corridor. But here's the best part about it. That's going to happen. And that's going to happen soon because there's an actual owner in the process of developing the property.
So that brings us, as we move further to the west, to the downtown district. And really what we're calling the downtown district, the two blocks, the 1300 and 1100 blocks that flank the square. And that's really where you have the highest concentration of buildings, a higher density. And it really feels like a downtown place and a wonderful mix of architecture in there. As Randy was just explaining, the Woodies is right here, which really, as a destination business, really starts to add more activity to this part of the downtown core, which is a tremendous opportunity to build on. If we look at the blocks here, this is the square, the 1300 block, and then the 1100 block. We're going to talk first about the 1300 block and then talk about the 1100. And some of these are just minor interventions and improvements. Others are more significant. In the 1300 block, there's two significant opportunities: the former press building, and then we want to talk about an exciting opportunity, a potential location to consider for the new library. We know there's been conversation about attracting the library downtown. It's a very important anchor to consider for the downtown. The 1300 block, wonderful character, great mix of architecture, great streetscape. And I want to maybe step back and say Andy and I both do a lot of streetscape work throughout the country. And the streetscape that you've installed on Russell is probably one of the most outstanding that we've ever seen. The quality of materials, it's a great environment that really sets the stage for some of this investment that we're talking about. As we look at the corner here, the Crest building, former Crest building, is located right on the corner here. That presents a tremendous rehabilitation opportunity. We also have a couple where there's some surface lots. These are just, future consideration. We didn't get to talk to those property owners, but they would be candidates for some infill development in the future if there was ever that need to kind of close those gaps along the streetscape. But I'm going to turn this back over to Randy to talk a little bit about the opportunity for the Crest building.
Well, first of all, I'm just a huge fan of Crest buildings, whether they be sort of simple ones like this one or very ornamental ones like in Columbia or Charleston. Just great historic buildings featuring these great porcelain panels. And I was blown away when I got to walk inside this building. And again, my thanks to Mary and some of the others from the county who graciously got me inside this. The building's in fantastic shape. Now, let me qualify terms. I'm a historic preservation architect. So I've walked through my good fair share of pigeon poop, okay? So, pigeon poop and moldy carpet does not scare me, all right? So I do understand there's certain things that need to be done to get this building back in tip-top shape, but the important things, the structure and everything is intact, and it's a really strong, sound building. But most importantly is the fact that this offers so much potential so readily. Number one, I don't know if you know this, but the original stainless steel canopy with retractable awnings is still there. It's just underneath that black metal roof. Number two, the way the building was configured, it offers a lot of square footage. And we've had some conversation with some potential partners ranging from the county, some county disabilities to other universities who are quite interested in collaboratively joining and going into this building, which I think would be terrific. One of the conversations we talked about in the square is to not worry about putting too much retail in the square, except rather populating it with professional office space, with public benefit services and organizations like we're proposing for this one. And so this rendering just shows us basically taking it back to the way it was. But if you've ever been to Savannah, seen the Savannah College of Art and Design,
You know, they put this really cool sort of stainless statuary letters on top. And what we would encourage you to do is to really brand this building as the Crest, just to take it back to its historic roots. And then occupants that go inside, whether it's the county, a university, you know, it doesn't matter, Claflin, OC Tech doesn't matter. But imagine being able to say, you know, we're at the OC Tech Technological Center at the Crest, or we're with the county administrative offices at the Crest, or we're with South Carolina State's Art Department at the Crest. You know, just brand the building according to that destination. You've got this really wonderful opportunity up high on the building to kind of create almost a gateway mural that welcomes people in the downtown district. This building just is chock full of potential, and it's ripe to be filled. It's got plenty full square footage. It has parking in the rear, and the best thing of all, the building's in great shape.
As we look at as Randy said, looking at the square as locating some business, office uses along there prominent. You also have a number of civic uses along there, the churches, and we think this is a tremendous opportunity to consider a potential location for the new library. This is the small parking lot that's been closed off because of the mural building that's in poor repair and needs to be demolished. If we look at those two lots together, which are right on the corner here, that could be a potential new library. It has a significant presence on the corner, identity, much like this building here with the circular tower in the corner, really offering, reinforcing that civic presence around the whole square, utilizing some of the existing parking along the street and some of the parking behind. You know, there's a real temptation in downtown libraries to have all the parking right on the same property. We think there's a lot of parking in the downtown and nearby, and people walking from destinations to parking. It encourages you to browse past existing businesses, frequent businesses, and this could really be a tremendous asset to the corner and the square. This is at Greenwood, South Carolina's new library. When we were working on the downtown plan there, they were considering doing it further out into the county, and the community really rallied around the downtown location, and the visitors to this library have really helped to activate the downtown, and it's been a real resource. As we look at move across the square to the 1100 block, this is the block that we really think is the part of downtown where most of your efforts and recruiting efforts should focus on luring some of these businesses, some of these restaurants that T talked about, some of these specialty food places, other businesses, to really create a concentration of uses in one place, build upon uses that are already there, the Blue Boat Theater, the proximity to several large parking resources in the square itself, some minor enhancements, enhancing the alley connections of the parking, enhancing some of the existing restaurants already there. Randy will talk a little bit about that. Animating the sidewalks with outdoor displays and outdoor dining. That's a very simple thing that adds life to the street and the sidewalk. And then starting to attract new businesses to this block, preserving the Ellis Building site for redevelopment, and then looking maybe for some farmers market opportunities in this area. This is the square. It's just a wonderful street, wonderful landscape, a wonderful mix of architecture, very solid concentration of buildings. If we look again at our plan, again the square to the right, this is the Ellis Building. We know that has to come down. It's in very poor shape. We really think it's important to replace that with a building at some time in the future. It could be temporary parking, but it should not really be viewed as a long-term surface parking area. The square should not be a location to put parking resources. It really needs to be architectural definition around there and uses. We're looking at the existing alley connection. We heard from a lot of people that feel uncomfortable walking back there. It's not well lit. There might be some simple treatment with overhead lights that could be added on there, and then enhancing the rear parking lot to this side, much like you've done to this lower edge. We know one of these buildings in here is in very poor repair. If that has to come down, there's an opportunity to create another alley connection from this parking back here out to Russell Street to make that more convenient to pedestrians. Would really discourage as an overall strategy having businesses really attracting customers to the rear doors of the businesses, because then people go into the business, right out, and you're not encouraged to walk along and activate that street where you put a lot of investment and browse from one shop to the other. So these alley connections become important in getting people to the parking resources. And as we look at, this is what the rear parking lot on the south side that you had, this was several years ago, what it was looking like. Randy had worked here in the past and showed some photo renderings of how you can enhance the rear facades. And then this is what you've actually done, painting the rear facades, landscaping, lighting. We really got to commend you, the work that's gone on in some of the rear facades, not just addressing the front, but the rear, because that's really important. The customer, your customer's first experience of downtown is from this parking lot. So addressing what you've done to the back is very commendable. This is the alley connection on your left. A lot of very simple, inexpensive treatment. Maybe there's some string lights over the top to animate that. There might be some lights mounted on the side of it. And then these are some examples that Randy had shared with Bennettsville.
Save the front facade.
The front facade of the building was saved, and it became a courtyard and pedestrian connection back to the parking resources in the rear.
Thank you so much to the owners of JoJo's who allowed me to take a look at their building. You know, and bless their heart, they basically inherited a building that kind of concealed the glass that would allow you to look inside. And so we've understood you've got amazing food, and we want to make sure people can see all the activities and the great services that you have in there. And so this strategy is simply to remove the opacity, of the storefront windows, so you can see to the inside. Simply repair this little bit part of the side panel, and then use flat laser cut vinyl for your logos. Introduce a little bit of a splash of color paint, and then this is just a very inexpensive vinyl adhesive windows. And the beauty, assuming my numbers were correct, and the fact that y'all were offering $10,000 facade grants, you could do everything that's shown here with one of the facade grants from the city.
And additionally, in addition to that, just where you have some of the restaurants, Rosalie's and JoJo's, consider outdoor dining and umbrellas. Even if people aren't sitting at them, the color of the umbrellas, it enlivens the sidewalk, and it also signals from a distance, a visitor coming to town, see from a distance that that's a restaurant activity there. And it's a really important and, again, inexpensive feature. Some communities off to the right, you see where they may, during nice weather, here, most likely in the spring and fall, not the hottest months, but converting a couple parking spaces into outdoor dining as well if you needed to expand your dining area. So that's a very easy short-term solution that can be done. And even extending outdoor displays onto the sidewalk, again, you get some of that merchandise that you have and you're selling, spill it out onto the sidewalk to enliven those sidewalks. Very quick fixes. And then farmers market, a lot of drawing a farmers market somewhere near this 1100 block or near the square, where we want to concentrate people. Get people used to coming downtown with regularly scheduled events. And a lot of times they start, this is the square on Centerville, Maryland. A lot of times it's just starts out as a very small event, but then it might transform into something else, fill an entire block or a segment of a block. And an ideal one would be this short segment of the square in front of the Baptist Church, or any of the sides of the square could be a great street for a farmer's market. People could buy food, then go into the square, enjoy a lunch or snack, and activate that or browse on the nearby businesses. So those are very easy strategies. The Garden District is really the next, linking the downtown to Edisto Memorial Gardens. And this is we didn't concentrate our efforts here because we think most of the focus should be in the 1100 and 1300 block and some of those larger sites linking to the university. But the focus here should be, there's a lot of great historic structures along here, the buildings across from the public Department of Utilities. They're great buildings. Focus on restoring those over time, not tearing them down. And then looking at where you have a lot of gaps, these could be some large infill development over time, preserving these opportunities but not doing a suburban style development, a fast food restaurant that has parking all the way around. Use some of the techniques we showed earlier. And then there's an opportunity T talked about, there's some market for sports related stores and retailers, and taking advantage of the proximity to the park and the gardens and the trailheads and the greenways that are proposed, and maybe focus on some of those activities in this area. Again, looking at long-term opportunities. You already extend the feel of the gardens into the downtown. It's just a phenomenal streetscape. You should all be very proud of what was done here. We just need to get more people enjoying this streetscape and walking into the downtown. We saw kayakers on the river the other day, and you have, this is a trail and bikeway master plan that's been developed for Orangeburg. A lot of connections to the colleges, to the gardens, and to the surrounding community. And so there's a real opportunity to take advantage of this, the trailheads that will be at the gateway at the end of Russell Street to the gardens, and take advantage of this to enliven your downtown.
All right, I'll tell you what, nothing like getting into an hour-long presentation an hour and 20 minutes in. I'm going to do my best. My part should only last about 2 hours, so we're in a home stretch. Hopefully you're excited about what you've seen so far. One of the things that we're going to talk about is how to stitch it all together and help tell this story. The market potential here is unbelievable. I will say, being a University of South Carolina grad, as I go through and I try to figure out why, with all the ingredients that you have, more hasn't happened here, the only thing I can come up with is you've just used too much orange in the past.
Oh.
Just kidding. So, I know, I just made a whole bunch of enemies in the audience. No, okay, so what we're going to talk about now is we're going to talk about branding and marketing. And what we want to do is we want to create a foundation of communication to be able to communicate and talk about your downtown. And the nice thing is being able to focus on downtown gives us the freedom to not necessarily bear the burden of the community story holistically. We're able to really focus in on this district. It's a district that's not done. It's a district that we know needs work, but it's a district we're excited about. So we started out by defining a set of colors. We left orange in. We felt like we had to. But what we did was we built it out with a series of other complementary colors. And the weird thing about it is, as dumb as this might sound, you have to pick the right colors. Because the wrong orange and green together send a very different message than the right orange and green together. So we wanted to start with a foundation. So then from there, what we did was we started to look at typeface. We wanted to use typeface and a uniform typeface to help connect the dots between organizations, between activities and events, and really help people to better understand the dynamic happenings of this district. So what we did was we defined two different typefaces. Now, I know that you're an old community, but that doesn't mean that everything you do has to be this beautiful script. It's time to get serious downtown. So our primary typeface is a contemporary sans serif typeface. It shows that we are moving forward. But we know that you're also a beautiful community. You're the Garden City. So we wanted to give you an accent typeface that did incorporate some of that ornate flourish. So we look at colors, we look at typeface, and then we come around to message. And with that, what we did was we crafted something that we call a brand statement. This is the opportunity for us to take all the things that you all said about downtown and convert it into a campaign and a direction for us to tell your downtown story. We are downtown Orangeburg. We're a place of history and beauty. We're a place of industry and activity. We're a place of education and opportunity. We're a historic downtown, built on the edge of the nation's longest Blackwater River. We are the railroad corner, connecting the gateways of Claflin and South Carolina State Universities. These proud institutions have crafted storied legacies of education and leadership for generations. We are the historic square, a peaceful space in the heart of our town with the potential for activities and events, festivals and farmers markets, a place flanked by downtown blocks, bustling with shops, cafes, and a vibrant street life. We are the Garden District, the link between downtown and Edisto Memorial Gardens, a place of beauty and tranquility for generations, where residents and visitors celebrate the Festival of Roses, stroll by or paddle down the Edisto River, and find an escape in the heart of our community. We are downtown Orangeburg, and we are working hard, but we are not there yet. We invite you to join us as our vision becomes action. Become a part of the dream, and you'll find out what we mean when we say, downtown Orangeburg, it's all coming together. We're acknowledging the fact that we know we're not done. We got to be realistic because we have to earn the trust of our consumers again. As T told you, your own customers have dismissed you as a viable option. It's not that they don't have money, it's that they choose to spend it somewhere else. So we have to cultivate that market again. We are starting from scratch. So we wanted to have a simple, bold system that would allow us to do that. We looked throughout the community. We saw a lot of organizations out there that were doing things very, very well. I think one of the things that hit us as we came into the community was those gorgeous new banners that Platform has put up, that strong, impactful imagery. So we took some inspiration from that as a baseline for how we can communicate. We created an overall logo and a stylized letter O, created out of a series and facets of color. Sound familiar? Now, we pull that all together. We talk about this is the place to come together, right here in downtown Orangeburg. We create a system that's expandable. It works in one color. It works in black and white. But where it starts to get some real legs is when we start to look at these districts that you heard Tom describe. Whether it's the railroad corner, whether it's the college corridor that goes in and actually pulls the colors of those institutions out to make their own colors. The downtown district as a whole, the square as a destination in the center, and the garden district. So now all of a sudden, that one simple stylized O becomes an overall system to help people understand your downtown and the components that make it up. And it allows us to be able to cultivate each one of those districts in the appropriate way. And you have to realize, as we are going through this, the task ahead of us is large. And it means that we are not always going to be able to do everything fairly. If I have 5 kids and 5 spoonfuls of rice, is it better for me to give each one of them 1 spoon? Or is it better for me to give the strongest 5 spoons, get them good enough and strong enough for them to start growing more food? That's what we have to do here. We have to be able to start building sustainable districts and be able to focus enough resources to create the foot traffic that will spur additional growth. And the thing about these districts are not only are they geography based, but they're personality based. They have different markets and they have different interactions between the consumer and the retail potential. Now, that's talking about the place, but we also want to arm the organizations that are activating the space with identities that help to replicate this. We were able to look at what Dora had done historically, and they have created a very, very strong graphic standard. We wanted to essentially take that inspiration and move it forward. So we took that stylized icon, we incorporated it into that Dora name, but then if you know anything about the organization is a Main Street program which uses the Main Street 4-point approach to revitalization. And those 4 points are design, promotion, organization, and economic development. Now, what we're recommending here is the organization operates off of 3 committees: an economic development committee, a promotion committee, and a design committee. We want to take 2 of those committees and we want to change the way that we communicate about those. We want to start with the Economic Development Committee. We want to change that into Invest Orangeburg. We want to give them an economic development savvy And these folks need to be the ones that are helping to make the numbers work downtown. They need to be able to connect potential building owners and business owners with grant opportunities and funding sources. We want to take the promotions committee and we want to turn them into a marketing savvy entity that is the one that is drawing in volunteers and helping people feel connected to downtown. So we're going to rename them Downtown Alive. And they're going to run the events that Dora sponsors downtown. So now all of a sudden, you have the parent organization of Dora, and you have different opportunities for people to get involved in different areas of development. The simplicity of the icon allows us to very easily migrate over into social media, being able to effectively and consistently have that message. But then we also have to remember, we've got the city. Now, the city is different from the destination. The city is an organization. One of the things that we did here was we actually took the historic seal of the community. We actually cleaned it up and have created a new version. But what we're going to be doing for them is we're also going to be making some recommendations on how they might change their image. But just like major colleges and universities have athletic logos and academic logos, we do want there to be some separation. The city's got some tasks that aren't always fun, like picking up garbage and that kind of stuff. They inherently take taxes from us. We're not always happy with their decisions. So being able to create some buffer between the organizational entity and the destination is key. Being able to look to other entities like DPU, they might find that they want to adopt ways to connect, changing overall regional market perception of downtown. Being able to keep their icon the same, but simply update their look to show that they're collaborating. Chamber of Commerce as well could take that same concept and have Orangeburg County Chamber. And I will say, one of the things I always do is chambers are great about changing their name so that they can be relevant to a larger geography. But the fact is, what do we call them? The chamber. So I always give the organization the opportunity to have variations of that identity. You can see, here's one where Chamber's the biggest, here's one where Orangeburg's the biggest. Depending on where you are, the emphasis needs to be on the appropriate identity. So having that variation is key. Now, one of the things we'd love to see the chamber be able to do is to step up and be able to use their publications to help amplify some of this message. So we're actually making a recommendation on their chamber membership directory to convert it to more of a magazine format, call it Endeavor Magazine, and be able to use it to highlight those business owners. Use it to highlight the employees and the people behind the place. Now, from there, I also want to talk a little bit about fostering pride. We're seeing a plan today. We've talked a lot about organizational cooperation and the need to change culture and foster communication. We want to start that with a campaign or an initiative that we're going to call DREAM. And this concept of DREAM is the overarching initiative that we want to be used as a collaborative catalyst. At any point, we are converting your visions into actions. The time to plan is done at the end of this presentation, and we're moving into time to do. So we want to be able to really tell that story. We want to start fostering community pride. We want to remind people, remind your friends and neighbors why Orangeburg is special. We do this all over the country, and I have to tell you, this is the single largest attendance I have ever had at a final presentation. I have given over 350 of these, and you guys have figured out a way to bring out more people than any other place. So you've got the ingredients going. It's time to start moving. But it's not enough just to talk about that organizational collaboration. We have to focus on the community conversation. With that, I'm going to let Becky talk for a second about that. Yes, ma'am? I'll turn it down.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Okay, good. Well, since Monday night We want the conversation to continue, so this is what we want you to do. We want you to move away from your televisions. We want you to move away from your cell phones, from your tablets, and we want you to move towards one another. Every individual in this community needs to feel that he or she is connected to a living community in which relationships and ideas encourage solidarity. We want to introduce the formation of conversational salons, which are not new, but are perhaps the new venue for a new cultural revolution. The revolution of rebuilding and revitalizing communities and their creative energies. Salons can take place anywhere, with any number of people, and they should be informally organized, small groups, and for the purpose of making your vision a reality. You can invite 5 people over to your house for beer and pretzels, for Coke and potato chips, for wine and cheese, or just to come over and, go to Bernice and Don Chipple's house and everybody sit in the pool. And just have a conversation. And what we want these conversations to be about is about this plan and how you can be a part of moving it forward and making things happen. And I will be working with Jennifer Hazing to, yeah, we'll be working with Jen. I'll be working with Jennifer Hazing to develop some themes that these salons can be centered on. There's an overused but quite relevant Margaret Mead quote, and I want to overuse it once again. If you don't know who she was an American cultural anthropologist. And what Margaret Mead said was, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Well, my message to you is, you are the citizens, and this is your world.
Fantastic. I love that. All right, we're on the home stretch, I promise. Okay, the thing we need to do is, it's all well and good until we change culture. We have to focus on changing the culture and the mindset about downtown. So first thing that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the big building improvement grants. Okay, we've talked a lot about facade grants, and there's been a lot of talk about facade grants, but what you need in downtown is something that is far more versatile. So you need to be able to open that up not only to facade components, awnings, signs, paint, windows, doors, but also the things like roofs, sprinkler systems, structural remediation, roll-up of mold and asbestos, all those things that are needed to convert buildings that are underperforming into buildings that perform. Do you want to say anything else about that? So this is an incentive that is focused on the property owners. The next is a retail incubation program that we're calling Endeavor 2014. It is a hopefully annual event that will be focused on bringing new retail business into downtown. So what Endeavor 2014 would do is it would offer a business plan competition with a seed of money to offer the potential for forgivable loans. The forgivable loans get earmarked to be used for rent. Therefore, you start to partner business plans up with building owners, knowing that they can forecast a certain revenue from that potential business owner. In addition to that, though, you also line up local professionals who are willing to give in-kind business service donation to make sure that that business plan winner has the support that they need to create a well-rounded business from the start. Accounting, graphic design, marketing help. So now all of a sudden, it's not just about money. It's about starting the businesses the right way. Because the thing we all know is every time a business fails in downtown, it's Orangeburg's fault. That's not the truth, but that's what consumers perceive. So we got to change that, and we can do it with Endeavor 2014. Then we also want to recommend this concept of SOLID, which is a loan guarantee pool. Now, one of the things that gets talked about a lot is low interest loan programs. Well, low interest loan programs first requires the person asking for the loan to know that the low interest loan is available. Second of all, it makes an assumption that the thing that they need is a lower interest rate. When in actuality, a lot of times what they need is a different level of flexibility. A loan guarantee pool is a completely different approach. You create a circulating pool of money that is accessible by financial institutions who deem a business plan and loan application as a viable business option that shows a slightly higher level of risk than they're comfortable with. They then apply to the loan guarantee pool to help bridge the gap in that loan application. So you can use this money to leverage more and more willingness from the financial institutions. So we've looked at property owners, we've hit up retail opportunity and prospective business owners, now we're hitting up the financial sector. And finally, we have to focus on consumer cultivation. And we want to do that with what we're calling the Power of 12. We want the collaborative of event organizing entities in this community to set a goal to bring the residents of Orangeburg into downtown once a month all year long. We need to be able to get people used to coming downtown again. T's information showed us that there are plenty out there that do not come at all. So a goal of once a month is an aggressive first step goal, and we can do that with the Power of 12. So now all of a sudden, as you hit building owners, business owners, investments, and the consumer, you begin to hit the facets that can shift consumer behavior for downtown. Now, a lot of these, you sit there and you say, man, that sounds like a lot of money. Where's it going to come from? There are all different funding sources. One I'd like to point out, Rural Business Enterprise Grant Program run by the USDA, can be used to purchase property, can be used to enhance properties. It can be used for startup capital. It has great opportunity. And because you're under 50,000 population, you qualify as a rural community by their standards. Individual organizations can apply for this money, nonprofits can apply for this money, and businesses under 50 employees that bring in less than $1 million a year can apply for this. So this is a great funding opportunity. Now, in addition to that, looking at how it works in print collateral, everything from shopping and dining guides, making its way into the events, celebrating Valentine's Day, your car show on the square, your Festival of Roses, Broughton Street Block Party, Taste of Orangeburg, and then even introducing new things like the Downtown Farmers Market. I brought the orange in, even though I can't come. You know, being able to have these opportunities to promote this, once again, you know, great ideas. Where's the money come from? There's another grant called the FMPP, the Farmers Market Promotional Program. It funds from $2,500 to $100,000 per grant to promote farmers markets, with a stipulation that 10% of that grant has got to go to the marketing of EBT acceptance and integration, so that you know that all income levels in your community can take advantage of good local fresh produce. Yeah, I don't know if you picked that up. The application deadline is tomorrow, so we're going to get on that. You know, being able to do street banners to help designate and show these different districts. The banners will help people to understand the different districts in downtown. Being able to take those identities, make them out into the business card, merchandise for people, being able to really promote this public pride, giving people the opportunity to be connected to Orangeburg. I can buy SC State stuff. I can buy Claflin stuff. I can probably buy Orangeburg High. Can I buy anything that lets me show my pride in the community? Being able to make sure that those opportunities available, being sure that you can connect shopping and cultivate shopping in downtown, whether you hate the environment and want to use paper bags, or whether you're sensitive to it and want to use canvas bags. No, I'm just kidding. But then coming around the bend too, being able to tell this story. When it all comes together, you create this opportunity to craft a truly inspirational message about downtown. And with the simplistic approach to branding, it allows you to tie together and use this simple graphic element to create a truly dynamic story about your community. And being able to show the images of your home, being able to highlight some of the things that you have to offer, and being able to even focus in on the details that you capture. All these photos of downtown were taken this week. So being able to show off, highlight, you know, we talked a little bit about the library, being able to promote that opportunity for your downtown. You've done absolutely beautiful investment, and you have beautiful people. This customer service downtown is absolutely fantastic, but they can't serve anybody. They don't have any customers. Being able to cultivate the vision for the business types you want to see, being able to show off the value you have for the architecture, and just starting to stitch together the whole vision of how dynamic Orangeburg can be and the things we want to start to see happen here. Highlight your heroes, highlight the personalities that you'll see as you travel downtown, and you will start to create a perception among people in this region that great things are happening in downtown Orangeburg. And once you do that, that buzz will be the thing that pushes market transformation. And I hope that you all are as excited about the opportunity as we are. I know that it is easy to be frustrated because you can sit there all day long and say, I mean, that was pretty, but it ain't gonna happen. And the thing that I ask, and I ask this from the bottom of my heart in the nicest way possible, if that is your mindset, all we need you to do is simply take 2 steps to the side. So those of us that are ready to move forward can do it.
People said amen. All right, so let me just tell you what's going to happen next, and I'm going to turn the floor back over to you. Everything that you saw and you heard today, in the next 24 hours, we're going to upload it in movie form to YouTube. So anybody, regardless of computing platform, can see it and hear it again. So if you want your friends and neighbors, your colleagues, your students to see this, hear this, and catch the vision, we're going to send that link back to people like Jennifer at Dora, probably Dee Dee at the Chamber, probably John at the city. We would humbly ask that you post that on your website so anybody who wants to hear and see this can see it in the future. The technical stuff follows later. You don't need to know other than to say, in response to what Ben just said, we're going to do our due diligence to the same degree that we try to inspire you through what you saw today. We're also going to try to give you a roadmap of how to make it work in terms of step-to-step guides as well as funding opportunities to make it happen. And with that in mind, I want to turn the floor over to you, give you the opportunity to respond in any way that you want to. You can tell us something you love, tell us something you like, tell us something you aren't sure about, tell us something you hated, or you can also ask us a question. The floor is open. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to see a movie near the South Carolina State and Claflin University. The movie theater.
Yes, ma'am. See a movie theater for the students.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Anything you'd like to say in response to what you saw today? Questions you have? Any comments? Yes, ma'am.
Well, now, I'm gonna tell you what I don't like. I'm sorry I wasn't at the meeting Monday night.
Sure.
You had an excellent presentation, but in order to actually attract the people back downtown, number one, you're gonna have to attract some good stores to the community. Because we travel to Columbia 3 or 4 times a week. That's money going out.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm one step from leaving.
Yes, ma'am.
So I wanna see more modern looking buildings. I like new.
Right. Good. And that's why we showed all of those opportunities, like Tom talked about, both restoring the existing buildings as well as providing opportunities for new. And as Steve talked about in the market, all of the opportunities that exist for so many different categories of new retail. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That's an idea we'll definitely take into consideration. Anybody else? I know we've been here a while. Yes, sir.
How do I get you, your organization, or I guess is that going to happen through Dora and the Chamber, would like to help us, let's say at the part-time players, we already have a building, maybe help us rebrand something? How do we go about doing that?
Probably just follow that request through Jennifer. And we'd be happy to help if we possibly can. Yes, sir. Last one. Yeah, make it good.
In the paper just the other day, it said that Walmart was refused his application to go out on Columbia Road. Why can't they take one of these buildings on Russell Street?
I'm sure that's probably conversation. Well, thank you so much for being so patient and during a long presentation. We'll stick around here in the front if you want to talk to us. Thank you so much.